Welcome back, all you cool cats and kittens. This is episode 3 of the 2022 preseason manager interview. Alongside us, we've got Eves filling in the hard-hitting questions and from his seat, joining in with a beautiful picture of Brandon with the lipstick in the background. And obviously, we got the commissioner Brandon over here, who's been servicing us really well from our inaugural season. And now it's his time to be on the hot seat. Eves, I'll let you take it from here.
Just to confirm, that photo in the background was not Photoshop. Yeah, thanks for having me, Brandon. Let's get to know you a little bit more here. Why don't you introduce yourself to the rest of the crew here? We got a few Canadians that joined this year, and they're a little bit suspicious of what you've been doing, so they want to get to know you a little bit.
Sounds fair. I'd be a little suspicious of my outlook too. So yeah, I'm Brandon Greenwood. I am a school psychologist. So I actually live in Helena, Montana. I moved here about a year ago from just outside of Sacramento, California. Love it here. I'm actually a school psychologist in Washington State. So I work out of Bothell, Washington, virtually. So that's pretty nice. Yeah, I've been playing fantasy football for years now, redraft. I think it's like 19 or 20 years of like redraft. Makes me feel real old, but this will be my first full year of Dynasty now under my belt. So yeah, learning along the way, learning from a lot of mistakes last year. Hopefully not as many this year, but I think that's to be determined. But yeah, that's basically me.
This is our first, real off season. And obviously for everyone, this is our first time. Actually, this is the first episode in which it was an existing manager from the inaugural season that we've had. So, for them to start out with the new manager drafts and roster takeovers, I would love to start off with, talk to us about some of the big moves and your mentality after the startup draft and some of the moves that you remember making mid-season last year. And then, we'll move over into the off season, but just curious to sort of see how anything shifted over for you for the last year.
Yeah, I mean, I felt pretty good coming out of the startup draft. I think Eves, you pulled the first pick in that. I got the second. I was able to take the love of my life, Josh Allen, at number 2. Obviously, he had a he had a great year, but carried my team pretty well there. I was feeling good. I think coming out of the gate, I put myself in that kind of playoff contender role, maybe even a little bit, higher than that. But I think it was pretty clear from the get-go that I had probably the most inconsistent team that you can in fantasy. I had a lot of assets, I think, across the board, but it was a kind of a weird blend of win now and future assets. My team didn't really have a direction. I think I was a little caught up in the dynasty thing of like wanting to make sure I didn't put all my chips into the basket of winning last year just in case it didn't work out. And I think that was reflected in my draft, I had guys like Javonte and, that's all I can think of right now. But about mid-season, when other teams started to have injury issues, I was still kind of on that playoff cusp. Like, yeah, this looks like a playoff team, but probably not in the tier of real contender. I made the move. I traded for Austin Eckler. I don't know if it was that like week 9. Which was pretty much his peak in value last year, although he played well throughout the rest of the year, but definitely took a little bit of a step back following that trade. And I traded Javonte and picks to get him, which in hindsight, obviously seems crazy. Pretty good learning experience there. But I thought that piece would put me over the top. I had made some moves to kind of shore up some other positions throughout. And, I thought I was just good enough to potentially, get lucky come playoff time. Didn't work out. My team was just as inconsistent prior to those moves, I would say, as it was before. I'd have weeks where I was the highest scorer by a halfway decent margin, and then the next week I was the lowest scorer by a decent margin, and I didn't really deal with injuries much either. So just a frustrating team. One that I saw. You see teams like Tim's making all these moves for the future and for now. I think I talked about it last year ad nauseum, just how stacked I, thought that roster was going to be. Obviously, Ryan's roster, Eves, your roster, like there's just some solid talents out there that I didn't foresee my team getting more consistent. I think that's something that you don't necessarily see in fantasy. And to me, there were a lot of guys on that team that were probably at their peak in value. A lot of guys that I couldn't anticipate them regressing positively. If anything, they were going to regress negatively. So that kind of led me into this season, and just trying to learn from some of those hit or miss sort of deals in between.
So Brandon, before we get into this season, like what are some of the moves that you wanted to make last year that you really tried to make and just didn't pan out or couldn't pull off?
That's a good question. I think the biggest weakness for me last year was like having a rock solid stud wide receiver that was consistent. I had AJ Brown, but he's so up and down. He got hurt. Like that was the one guy that, like, you know, just week in, week out, you never knew if he was actually going to play his hamstrings or some stupid stuff. So I was just looking for that like stud that would give me the consistency, whether it was running back or wide receiver. Obviously having Josh Allen and Dak Prescott, I felt good there. But again, I don't think I was willing to commit to a guy. I still had that like that dynasty like need. He needs to still be young. Like he still needs to be entering or right in the middle of his prime. And the chances of me finding that on a rebuilding or on those lower tier teams was not very high, which is why I ended up overpaying for an Eckler at the time. And I think that sort of experience and learning that like, just because I want a guy, like none of these contending teams are going to give him to me. So being able to wrap my head around that and realizing that I need to build off of some of these lower teams, but just the way our league worked out last year, some of those lower teams weren't open for business. So that was kind of the frustration there. I can't think of a specific guy or a move that I really wanted, but to me, there was more than one, probably closer to 3 or 4 pieces that I needed off of last year's team at the end of the year to actually put me over the top coming into this year. I think I realized pretty quickly that I would have to get incredibly lucky in the playoffs to actually like be a contender, right? It would be like a squeak by kind of thing. And you saw that late in the season after I'd built this team and I, you know, up until the last week, there was a chance that I didn't make the playoffs, an outside chance, but Ben had a chance. It was like, we came down to points really. And I just happened to, you know, have enough points. So that's not comfortable to me. I've said all along, I didn't want to be a middling team. I didn't want to be a team that just squeaked in or just squeaked out of the playoffs. I wanted to like commit one way or the other. I didn't foresee at the end of last year it going the way it did for me. I never would have predicted that. And even now there's days where I'm like, holy shit, like this is like, you're all in, like I'm all in on whatever strategy this is. We'll see if it crashes and burns, whatever. But yeah, it's something that I've definitely dove headfirst into a concrete pool without a helmet. Like I'm figuring it out. So yeah, there wasn't like any one move that probably would have like swayed me one way or the other. I didn't like the composition of my team.
Maybe like moving from that. You talked about sort of, you know, the moves that you made and, you know, you thought you're a playoff contender and you made the moves in mid-season to solidify that position. Obviously, talking about how last season didn't go the way that you intended it to go or expected it to go. You've been the biggest move maker. You've been the market center of the draft picks in this off season. So that commitment to the productive struggle, right? Like talk to me about your mentality of coming into this off season and all the moves that you've made, and we'll take the conversation from there.
Yeah, I think my kind of shift in what I wanted to do really happened at the expansion draft, or, you know, whatever, the startup draft for the 2 new guys. I just saw 2 teams there that, you know, I thought were playoff contenders pretty much from the get-go. I thought those 2 would be competing for the playoffs. You know, whether or not that's still the case is to be, you know, determined. But to me, those were 2 teams that I was going to have to be battling it out for, at best, the 4th spot in the playoffs. And at that moment in time, I started to realize that I was, especially from Kyle, that I was going to get a lot of action, right? That we had now new blood in there that was going to want to make trades, that was going to give me the opportunity to go in whatever direction I wanted to. It was very clear that Kyle was going for it. And I think Sergey was going for it too. But Kyle definitely had things in mind. And I mean, later that night, I was sitting at the bar and I got this offer for Dak. And to me, in my head, that was like, all right, we've gone from contending to retooling with that trade. But that's exactly what I wanted to do with that trade. I wanted a young quarterback and I wanted the pick next year. I'm obviously very high on next year's rookie draft. I love drafting. It's like my favorite thing to do. I love diving into tape. I love doing all of those things. That's gonna keep me warm through this very cold season up ahead. But that's my thing. So I value those picks higher than probably anybody. And so that trade shifted it to a retool. When it got further, when I got the offer from Sergey to trade Joe Mixon, that shifted me into a rebuild. In my mind, I've now traded Joe Mixon, who's 24, 25 years old. Like, he's not an old talent, but he's someone that I probably could have built around, and still, with some pieces, with some hits in this draft, I probably could have pushed for a 4, 5, 6 sort of standings. But once I got that deal and then accrued those picks, that was it. I was all in. Let's trade anything that anyone will buy at this point.
So Brandon, you're clearly rebuilding for 2028. What hobbies do you plan on taking on to kill time until then?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I might just start. I'll just start betting on your guys' matchups. Maybe I'll play a little like mean
Calvin
score.
Ridley.
Well, yeah, exactly. I'll see if I can beat my mean score every week, something like that. No, I mean, I'm going to be way more into college football than I even was before. I think that's the biggest thing. What's nice, it's not like part of me, it obviously scares me. I'm like, oh man, like, this could be a long thing, right? Like, this could be years of this. But it's fun. It's fun watching the young guys kind of break out and grow in value. I like scouting. It's just a weird thing I like to do. So now actually being invested in that is going to be a lot of fun. As far as the week in, week out, I can still, I'm the kind of guy, like, I can take the L's and I'll be fine because I have a goal in mind. To me, I want to still learn and build. So, I don't have a roster where it's going to be, start these 10 guys every week. I want to put out the best lineup I can every week. And, we're talking tier 3, tier 4 players, but at the same time, like, I want to prove to myself week in and week out that I at least knew who to start in every matchup and things like that. So I think that'll be fun. Things like that. I mean, I'm looking forward to the, 2023 draft. And I know the perception of like how long my rebuild is all over the board. I kind of fall in the middle, to be honest. I'm a little bit more conservative than some of the things I've heard that people think I can contend. But at the same time, I think it'll be sooner than later. So I think,
before just flying cars, probably.
Well,
so this next question I have for you, I think it's going to segue actually really perfectly into one of the big questions that I think are a lot of people's minds. But did you wish you had a time machine that could go back 10 days?
What was 10 days?
For that Jake Allen trade? So you didn't make
No. No. So the biggest concern with me, I'm fine trading him. I like the deal that I got. I'm okay with it. I was happy with the return. I love the player. And I think that was the hardest piece for me. I'm never going to be able to find another Josh Allen. That's just not going to happen. But at the same time,
Allen?
What's that?
Did I say Jake Allen? I think
Yeah,
I did.
it's okay.
Jake Allen's a hockey goaltender. My bad.
Yeah, Blues, right? Anyways, yeah. So it's just one of those things. Like, you got to maximize value. I've heard a lot coming out of Buffalo. They don't want him to run as much. I don't think you're going to see as many goal line runs. They're trying to protect the dude, which I think will increase. He's obviously surrounded by a ton of weapons. I think he'll be fine, but I'm not sure that his days of putting up number one overall fantasy numbers going forward are going to happen as much. Top 5, top 6 fantasy numbers, you're still not disappointed. But at this point in my full down, tear down rebuild, you got to maximize value. And he was obviously the biggest value I had sitting on my team by far. And I mean, looking at the assets I got, it fit perfectly what I was trying to do, right? So I got picks 6 and 8 this year. Obviously, not looking like the best draft, but those should still be solid contributors to my team down the line, whether or not they're actually in my starting lineup or they just build on my depth. Either way, I'm happy. I got Choda's pick next year, which is a guaranteed at worst number 4, even if another person jumps ahead of that in the draft. That's huge for me. No, I can, throw 4 guys on a draft board and know that I'm going to come away with one of them. And that's not even including my pick, which is almost guaranteed to be 1 or 2, right? So that was huge. That's a big piece for me. I got Rashad Bateman, who has only increased in value since then. So obviously I couldn't have known that at the time, but that's been good for me. And then a 2024 first from you. And in my head, when I made that deal with Tim, Tim gave me the choice if I wanted his pick or if I wanted your pick. And I mean, obviously to me, that wasn't a tough decision because I think Tim is a juggernaut. But also looking at the composition of your team, you're very clearly, your window is like win now.
Oh, my whole team's going to die at the end of the season.
Exactly. So looking at, when the meteor strikes, looking at that pick in 2024, there's a halfway decent likelihood that could be a lottery pick. So I like that as well. So yeah, I mean, all in on that trade. I probably had a harder time losing a guy like Deontay Johnson just as kind of a throw in. That was hard for me. But I'm not disappointed with that trade.
It was hard for me seeing you guys whore him out as much as you guys did in the last year or so. I love Deontay. I had a hard time giving him away too, and then Tim just threw him away in the garbage. Like he didn't care about him the way I cared about him. And then
I got him back. I wanted him back on my roster, and I brought him back. I'm not going to let him go, Eves.
I'm keeping an eye on him.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean and again, that's kind of a question mark too. Do I hold him into the season with the potential of Trubisky throwing him the ball? Like, I can't see his value rising in that scenario. And then a Cortland Sutton's his value's not going to go any higher. Like the hype on Sutton is outpacing what I think is the likely output on him, and he's 27 years old. So like, none of these guys to that point fit anything. Like my timeline in my head is 2024 and on. And so they don't fit. And so Josh Allen would fit. I mean, the guy's going to be a stud for 10 or so more years, but at the same time, I'm all in on this. So I couldn't let my heart get in the way.
Smart move.
We'll see.
Potentially.
What are your plans for all those picks now, Brandon? So you've got a record-setting, I think it was 15 first rounds this year, next year, 2024. So basically all the boards, all the drafts, first rounds is available. He's got 15 of them. And I believe you have another 6 second-round picks, something like that. So, all those picks, that's more than your entire roster could handle, given it's 25. What are your plans for how you're going to utilize those picks?
So I have no intention of trading any through 2023. Maybe this year, if anyone wants to, come up, grab a player, I could be convinced to maybe throw something this year if it made sense for me. 2023 is, I mean, unless the offer is just way too good on my timeline to say no to, those are locked down. And I don't care if it's late first, early second, any of those. Like, to me, it's all the same. And I think I mentioned in one of our previous interviews, I mean, I honestly think there's 11, 12 guys out there in 2023 that would easily be the first overall pick this year in this year's rookie draft. So, I have the opportunity to get 5 of those. It's 6. I mean, if you consider the second rounder too, that's my goal. And next year's draft is much more, there's a whole lot, it's more diverse as far as different positions of strength. Whereas this year, we're literally talking 1 running back, which is now questionable, and a bunch of wide receivers. So next year, there's 2 studs already. There's 2 stud quarterbacks that have elevated. There's like 5 or 6 stud running backs. We got a handful of wide receivers and a stud tight end. Like there's a chance for me in that draft to diversify my lineup with guys that fit my timeline and going forward. Now, depending on how everything shakes out, and again, I'm not super high on this year's draft, so I'm not thinking this year's draft is going to move the needle for me too much in the short term. 2023, I think you have guys that could come right in and, you know, be top 10 sort of producers. Depending on how that shakes out, if, you know, I get lucky in the lottery and some guys slip and whatever, I see my window of opportunity opening potentially to contend for the playoffs as one of those middling teams after the 2023 draft. I don't know. I think that's some people will say you're crazy. Some people will say, you know, maybe. But to me, that's where it starts to be like, all right, should I go for this? Which in that case, there's no reason for me to hold on to 5 2024 picks. I'm probably not giving up any that, you know, look like surefire lottery picks. But to start to trade for some win now sort of players or like entering their prime sort of players with those picks and my dearth of wide receiver picks, that's kind of my strategy. So that would put me at, going into the 2023-2024 season as hopefully not a bottom feeder anymore. If I'm, you know, 5th or 6th as it stands with no trades, I'm incredibly happy at that point. But yeah, those 2024 picks, I would not say are off limits. But the problem is they're off limits for now. So like for people to be patient with me on that, that's going to be really hard for other people to do. But in my head, I'm not looking to trade those until after the 2023 rookie draft.
So Brandon, as you know, there's a lot of rumors out there. So one rumor in particular, like I'd like to get cleared on the air today is I heard that Hollywood's been after you to use your current cast, your current roster of nobodies to do a remake of The Longest Yard. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, it sounds about right. We're talking the remake or the original. I think I'm fit more for the remake. So, you know, I'm looking for
a remake of the remake.
There you go. Good point. I'm looking for some, you know, old WWE superstars to come in and fill out my, you know, my cast here. But yeah, I mean, it is. It's funny to look at. Like, in no world is this rock. Like, if you just eliminated the picks, anyone looking at this would be like, this guy is about the dumbest fantasy football player I've ever seen in my life. And that still might be true. I'm not saying that's not true. But what I'm saying is, like, I'm invested enough in this league, and I think it's important for me to address too, because I would have worries if I was any other manager, especially the ones that don't know me. It very clearly yells, he's just trying to tank and like he's gonna bail, and then how are we ever gonna find, like, how would you even work out the logistics of trying to like divvy up all the assets off my team, right? Like, it would be a nightmare. That's not me. I'm so invested in this league. Like, I'm looking at things 15, 20, 30 years down the road. And that's where I'm going with it. I don't care. Like, I'll get through the next 2 to 3, 4, whatever years, no problem. But this is what I want to do. Like, this is what's enjoyable to me about this sort of league. You know, when I play Madden, I'm not playing the games. Like, I'm building the team over and over and over and over again. You know, that's how I play the game. It could crash and burn, who knows? Like, but at worst, you know, I'm prepared to go 10 seasons of last place if that's what it takes to win 1 year. So that's kind of where I'm at. We'll see. I think it's fun too. Like, we're so early in this, everyone's still like trying to figure out where they are, how like every manager works. I'm happy with myself for kind of jumping out ahead of that and just saying, this is what I'm doing. And I think the ripples of that we're already starting to see. But I think, you know, a year from now, we're going to start to see even more when you start to see some of those teams that are coming into that rebuilding phase that realize that there's no draft picks available for the next year or two. I think that's going to have some ripples. Whether or not that increases or decreases the value of the ones I have, we'll see. But yeah, I'm pretty excited. I mean, it's like building from the ground up, right? Like, I get to pick, you know, my window, what core I want, whether I want to start with receivers or start with quarterbacks or whatever. Like I kind of have the opportunity to do that at this point.
Brandon, when I was sort of chatting with you around sort of the Josh Allen trade, and as you noted, like before that you had the Dak and you traded, Joe Mixon away after that, and you're fully sort of committed into it. Obviously, it was hard for you to sort of think about the idea of trading Josh Allen away. But I remember sort of like chatting with you about, you have the index of the superstars that are going to be fantasy superstars are going to be coming into the league in the next 3 years. And that's different than a hit rate, right? So I actually, I look at your roster right now. Sure. I mean, I think the existing roster of players that you have is probably going to win 2 games this season, right? But
oh, that'd be nice.
I think the 5 first rounders or the second rounders that you have all across the board, you should be able to get to a point where you get more wins in that. But I think I sort of look at how the 2025 season sort of looks like, or I'll call it 2024 season that looks like. So you're going to have probably something like 12 early picks. I'm saying early being first or second picks. I think you're going to have, with your scouting, how much you're spending time watching film and watching college football, plus just the historical rates of dynasty rookie draft hits, I think you're going to probably net out from this 12, you're going to at least get 7 to 8 that I'll call as hits, right? Because all hits means is that they've produced at least an RB2, receiver 2, or QB type of numbers. I think you get 7 to 8, which means in an 8-team, 10-team league at that time, everyone's going to go on your roster, starting roster, right? Flex or whatever, we're starting 10. And then I think what's interesting though is off the 12, you're going to hit on 7 to 8, but I think you're also going to find yourself with probably 3 RB1s, receiver 1s, tight end 1s, QB 1s that you get. And now you're talking about a roster of 3 to 4 that you can, look at as basically today's, Jamar Chase's, today's, Jonathan Taylor's, today's Kyle Pitts. And I think those are the rosters that I'm just thinking about looking ahead for you in 2024, 2025. That's like the extreme piece that I'm just like thinking, hey, this guy's going to be a contender very, very soon. So you sort of alluded to this early on, which is there's a range of, expectations on when your contention window is. I feel like I'm on the aggressive side of that, where you said your moves are going to be after 2023 season. I actually think your moves, you start to sell a lot of those first round picks in 2024, mid-season in 2023, when you see how the 2023, the 5 first round that you've had and what that roster looks like with CJ Stroud's, the Bryce Youngs, the Bijan Robinsons, the Jacksons, whoever you want to sort of fill in there. I think you're going to be feeling like you're probably wanting to move and get into contention. And I think 2024 is going to be the time that you actually are a contender. So that's how I'm thinking, but I think it's quite scary of a prospect to sort of think through right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think what gets me excited, and I think anyone that really dives into next year's rookie draft, these aren't guys that kind of like came out of nowhere that you'd never heard of. These are guys that have been hyped since high school. Like Bijan's been hyped since his sophomore year of high school. Like these are not, oh, he got drafted to a good spot, so now we're going to draft him early. Like we have studs. And I think these are the type of guys that like NFL teams are going to move mountains, like whether they have to change the composition of their rosters to fit a Bijan or to fit a Bryce, like they're going to do it. So the bust rate on that sort, or not even the bust, but like, oh, this guy went to a bad situation, we didn't hear about him for 3 years. I think it's lower than in previous drafts, which makes me think that we're going to have quite a few more people coming out of 2023 that we don't have to wait for, that are day one solid, whether it's RB2 or wide receiver 2 sort of numbers, but I think they're plug and play sort of players. What I think is also important too is that almost all of them are coming out of big programs. Your Ohio States, your Bama, there's the guy the running back from Syracuse. He's probably kind of one of those where it's like, well, we'll have to see. But like, Jahmyr Bibbs and all these others, like they're big time programs, and those guys, like they don't have to learn a whole lot, as far as playbooks or schemes and that sort of thing. Like they come in and they're ready. So that gets me excited, where I agree. I think after that draft, how it all looks, how my team composition looks, I'm gonna have to take a hard look at that and say, do I want to, I've just drafted 2 stud running backs. Now I'm kind of tied to that timeline, right? Because they're so short in today's NFL. Do I want to wait a year and burn a year of RB2 production from these guys just because I'm missing a quarterback? Or do I want to trade what I consider a premium 2024 pick to shore that up to get someone, that's either towards the twilight of their career, but still produce, do I want to go get a Matthew Stafford sort of player to be able to shore me up as, we'll get into the playoffs and we'll see what happens sort of team. That's kind of the best case scenario in my head. Now, there's also the possibility, like you kind of alluded to, that we get halfway through the season. That's more like how your story unfolded, right? And like these guys started producing, and you're like, oh shit, like why not? Let's do it. That's obviously something I would like also. But to me, even the worst case scenario of this story puts me at 2025. Right? Even if I have to wait, a few years on this year's picks and maybe a year or two on next year's, they're going to eventually hit, because I truly think the talent of next year is there. If it's not and they're all busts, then, I'm looking at other ways to rebuild. But at the same time, I'm not the kind of person that's going to hold on to declining talent. Like if I'm looking at the composition of my roster, and at that point I have 10 rookie or second year players, I'll make the moves. I'll make myself a middling to contending team just by trading those guys off. So for me, it's just patience, right? Like I'm invested in this sort of strategy, but to do it the right way, I have to be patient through the 2023 draft at the bare minimum.
So Brandon, some of the you still have, your roster is not as much of a dire situation as they might look at first glance. So with that said, like what are some of the guys that you might still be willing to move this season that some of the new guys in the league might want to know, and potentially send you some options for, including myself?
Yeah, I don't think there's no desire to get any of my quarterbacks at this point. I am higher on Mac Jones than I think a lot of people are, but I'm not going to move him. He'll fit my timeline. I think looking at, I obviously have some tight end pieces, but it doesn't seem like there's not a big desire across our league to buy tight ends. So that's probably not an area that's going to move anytime soon. I think part of my strategy, I obviously wanted to fill out a roster. So I do have some of these kind of like young-ish running backs with some upside. I traded for Aaron Jones for like a week and a half. I didn't want him, but he just kind of fit the value that I was looking for at that moment. So he's gone. But trading for AJ Dillon is someone that I'm pretty high on. I like AJ Dillon. I think last year, towards the end when Aaron Jones was out, like he put up great numbers. So that's someone, I have a bunch of players on my team, the AJ Dillons, the Tony Pollards, those kind of guys that like are likely going to get their shot this year. And if they do something with it, their value is going to spike. So they're not guys that I'm looking to trade necessarily at this point, unless that's built into the offer. But definitely guys that, I think are going to have more appeal about mid-season or looking at the trade deadline. And then any wide receiver I have on my roster right now, I have a few young ones, but I'm about to get potentially 5 in the first round going forward. I don't think any contenders probably aren't looking at your Kadarius Tonys at this point, just because who knows what's going to happen with him. Gabe Davis, that's another sort of lottery ticket that, who knows. But guys like that, like, it's a weird composition at this point because they are so young, and looking at all of your guys' rosters and those like true championship contenders, none of these guys at this point are actually making a starting lineup. So I'm not sure, other than like insurance in case one of your guys goes down, or like looking at depth, they're probably not pieces that championship contenders are looking to put them over the top. But I do think maybe some of those middling teams or teams that are on the cusp might benefit from getting that injection of youth.
I think you're just saying that you're high on AJ Dillon because I just sent you an offer for him.
You'd be surprised. I did see that. He's probably right now, between him and Tony Pollard, I get a lot of little nibbles. The problem is I'm valuing them higher because I'm anticipating them breaking out. So they've been like the offers and like the talks break down really quick because I'm not getting, although the offers are like fair for the moment, I'm not getting things that to me fit my plans or like put me any closer to my goal than just holding them would. I don't see their value declining. So to me,
I'll add OBJ to the mix.
yeah.
Trade off.
Well,
You
that's
want
tough
OBJ?
too, right? Like I have all these picks. The thing I want most in the world, I have most of them. So trying to find an offer that doesn't include a guy that I'm just going to have to now look to flip again for what? It's tough. It's tough at this point. So I might be kind of stuck. We'll see.
Yeah, I feel like you've gone ahead and set the market on the price of first, but now you own the market, so you're the market maker. And now there's no more supply of first round picks, which is what you value that you can sort of get. Plus, I think you nailed it on the head with the roster makeup of your teams. Like from just a contender's perspective, someone that wants to get into playoffs. I'll say this: someone that will be disappointed if I didn't make the playoffs this year, because that would be my plan. I don't know if there's a player that necessarily moves a needle for me, right? Maybe like the TJ Hawkinsons, but obviously that was the case not anymore after acquiring Pitts on my sides. But everyone else, like you said, the intriguing pieces like the Tony Pollards, the even the AJ Dillons, Kadarius Tonys. It's a mix of like, okay, you probably don't want to sell it because the value is going to increase, or there's also dart throws in the case of a Kadarius Toney, which is like, I don't know if I have room for that, right? So I just feel like you're almost. I wouldn't be surprised if you're almost done making moves from now until end of the year, basically.
Yeah, I feel like I'm close. I think come trade deadline, though, if a guy like AJ Dillon takes over that backfield, at that point, he might be someone that could make a little noise in your lineup, something like that. We know that there's always going to be injuries. It seems like every year there's more. So, or in yours. But yeah, it's something I think I just have to wait for the right situation. And again, the biggest thing with me is patience. So, it might not seem that way. They've traded Josh Allen, but it really is kind of what I'm preaching at this point. So I'm fine going into the season and just waiting and hoping that some of these guys kind of take off. I will say, I think I've gotten fairly lucky just as far as free agency, the draft. That's been a big, these past couple of weeks and past few months have been another big learning experience to me, who's like first time experiencing this in Dynasty. Going into next year, I'm probably not going to make nearly as many trades prior to the draft as I did this year. I mean, it's like, it blindfolding. You just have to get lucky. Like, it's ridiculous. And, I've given up, some of these guys were not just throw-ins. Like Kadarius Toney was not just a throw-in to me, but his situation, like 2 days after I traded for him, got completely muddled. And, I got lucky with Bateman, and I'm sure his value would have spiked. I probably wouldn't have gotten him from you at this point. So it's just, there's too much uncertainty. And to like make these mega trades with these guys based on uncertainty is something I feel like I can't do going forward. Just the way I have to, my path that I have to follow here to like get to be a contender relatively quickly is very thin. So yeah, that's something I've learned from.
So obviously, Brandon, with you've already had the chance to talk about your ranking, your predictions for this year and how you think about the dynasty outlook come 3-5 years. So I don't think we have to necessarily jump into that section, but just to sort of wrap up the video here, Brandon, anything that you want sort of like the rest of the league, or anything like players that you're interested in sort of still moving, or anything that you would like to sort of sign the league off with on your video?
I think the biggest thing, like I alluded to, my 2023 picks are pretty much off limits. I think everyone knows that, so I don't need to like harp on that. I will say 2022 picks, this year could be open to it. I know it's not a great draft, but I think, yesterday and today, there's some intrigue about some of the landing spots on guys that we didn't necessarily think, we would be as intrigued about. If there's a guy you want, talk to me. I'm open to business on that. And then, it's a weird thing where I get to like root for certain teams. There's like 3 teams. There's maybe 2 teams out there right now of your guys's that I'm like, yeah, go team, because I own all the rest of the picks. So Eves, I'm pulling for you this year, but buddy, I hope you fall off a fucking cliff next year. That's just, no hard feelings, but that's it for me. And Tim, just do your thing. And then I hope, your team goes into a coma in 3 years. That's all That's all I can hope for.
Well, Brandon, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show today, and also hope you enjoy your new hobbies over the next 5 years to keep you busy.
Thank you. I think one of my new hobbies might be photoshopping photos of you every week for my videos. I think that might be something I get into.
Careful who you're messing with.
Looking forward to it. I know it might seem like I'm probably going to be depressed often this year, but I'm still looking forward to the season. I think there's still opportunities for me to grow outside of the draft, so we'll see. I think I'm looking forward to Vegas more than anyone. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, looking forward to having you here, and it was great to have you on episode 3 of the preseason manager interviews, Brandon. I think you're the most intriguing manager we have in the league. You've already shown that you can be a catalyst for causing ripples, and we'll talk about with Eve's trade, with my trades, in our own individual sections coming up in next episodes. But I think I'm excited for everything that's got in store for you, and looking forward to having you back in Vegas in a few months.
Sounds good. Thank you, boys.